video is brought to you by Squarespace. I'm currently on a mission to use up as much of my scrap fabric as humanly possible, which does beg the question, how the heck am I gonna get rid of it? Because the fabric scraps that I have aren't exactly easy to construct from.
And a lot of you lovely viewers on my previous stash busting video actually correctly guessed exactly where this was going, which I guess is not really the biggest stretch in the world, because the logical next step in my stash busting saga is definitely to make something out of patchwork. And this, of course, sent me on the deepest Pinterest rabbit hole of quilting and all of the different shapes that you can achieve with that. It looks so satisfying, and I definitely want to try something like that in the future, but I want to focus on something a little bit different today.
I want to make a very voluminous maxi patchwork skirt. This is a very classic way to use up like little squares of fabric scraps that you have. It does seem very daunting to me because the scraps that I have are quite small, so that means all of the little squares on the skirt are also probably going to be quite small. It's gonna require a lot of sewing, and the next part is the real kicker actually, because I have like 2 different color schemes of scraps that I think would look good together. So if at all possible, I'm gonna see if I can make 2 different scrap fabric skirts in this video. One with kind of like warm autumnal colors and one with more of like a cool tone celestial vibe. It's a tall order. We'll see if I can actually get to both of those in this video. Now friends, with those plans in place, let us go forth and begin cutting a bajillion little fabric squares. Welcome to my shame. You probably can't see all of it, but this is what we're working with. So I think the first step, of course, is going to be to sort through all of this stuff and figure out what is going to be appropriate for patchwork skirt, and what's basically just going to be stuffing for some later stuff. So thankfully I have already done a decent amount of sorting. I've mostly sorted out like the really big fabric cuts that I'm still going to be able to use for later projects. And in this bin, I mostly have smaller scraps like this piece. This bin is all stuff that I'm going to be able to use for my patchwork skirt. I also have like a ton of trimming and cutting to do. Most of the pieces are more like this. They're kind of just irregularly shaped. This is probably going to take me a while.
As you might have guessed, just cutting and prepping all the little squares I needed did take like an entire day. I also needed enough squares for, like I said, 2 skirts, so I was not the cleanest with my cutting job here. I basically had 3 or 4 different size squares per skirt, and I did measure out the first few squares that I was using, and then I used those squares as a sample to cut all of the other squares that I needed. I just laid those on top of my fabric and cut around them and called it a day because I don't have like a square quilting rule. That probably would have been helpful for this project, but I basically did all the different sizes so that I would have a lot of variation and randomness in my skirts. I didn't exactly have a plan going into this. I just knew I wanted to make a tiered skirt, which means just giant wide rectangles gathered to a certain point. So that means within those tiered rectangles, I can basically make my patchwork look however I want it to. So the plan was basically cut a variety of sizes now and experiment with different patchwork techniques later, whenever I could do a little bit more research.
So I have been cutting fabric literally all day, and I think that I finally have like a nice little collection here. I think I've made it through most of the scraps that I have already pre-sorted. There might be a couple more in a different bin that I can get and cut up. Currently I don't know how much I need, or generally how much of this fabric it is gonna take to make my skirts. I don't really feel like mathing that much on this project, so I think I'm just gonna kind of go assemble things as I sew and kind of just like figure it out. I think next I probably need to do some sewing tests to see how some of the different fabrics I have interact together and how much they're going to fray. 'Cause again, just, I don't know, I've never done this before. Oh, hello there. Don't mind me. I'm just scrolling on my own personalized website that I made using this video sponsor, Squarespace. I've spoken about Squarespace many times. Of course, my favorite part about it is the flexibility and how easy it is to customize your website, make it look however you want. You can use a professionally designed customizable template to get close to what you want, have a layout that fits whatever niche your website needs to fit into, and then you can have full control over things like colors and text and different website pages and all of your branding graphics. And all that is exceptionally easy to do. Only takes about 1 hour to go go from nothing to a beautiful website that actually feels like you and your brand. But so many of the things that you want to do with a website aren't passive. It's a blog post, a tutorial, a recipe, things that are interactive. And Squarespace is also, of course, great with that. You can start out with a page template the same way you can start out with a website template, and then you can customize it, add whatever you need to it to get what you need that page to do. I've done this a lot with pages documenting particular art projects that I've done in the past. One of my favorite things I've done with my website is started creating character profiles. Those are very interactive, and that kind of connection with my artwork, of course, also generates interest in sales, because Squarespace also has a fantastic e-commerce platform where you can sell whatever you need to, however you need to. Digital media, physical goods, memberships, services. You can even use a Square Reader to sell in person, and it will keep track of your inventory and all of the stuff that you need to do as you sell at festivals or conventions. And if you're too busy to produce your own products like me, you can even sell on easy mode with their custom merch feature, and their print-on-demand service will handle inventory, production, and shipping for you. So if you're in the market for your very own website or portfolio, you can head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, you can head to squarespace.com/pricklyalpaca to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you as always to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Now back to the project. So as I'm looking at some of these lighter color fabrics, particularly like this little leaf print here, I really love the design, but I just don't know if they are vibing as well with all of the other colors that I have here, especially like the autumnal ones. I think I am once again going to try a little dye bath to see if I can tint these like a slightly more yellowy orange ochre type color. Alright, I got some hot water here, and of course I am not doing this the correct way. I'm basically using the logic of heat makes stains set. So I'm just making some stains here basically. Some yellow ochre, and some brown. And I've also got literally some old hair dye, which works better than you might expect. I've already done this before. Soup. Okay, I'm now gonna add these to my soup and just let them set up for a little while.
1 hour later.
Okay, so our leaf fabric is now all dyed. It's looking pretty good. And I have also done a little sewing test for my fabrics. Obviously, this is not like the cleanest job here. Like, the cuts of fabric are not entirely square. This bottom line and top line also not completely straight, but we're gonna like work around this because, you know, we're working with weird cuts of fabric. It's gonna happen. I think next I really need to just start sewing together a bunch of these to start getting bigger strips of fabric to work with and ultimately put together the pattern for this skirt. This is probably gonna take a while.
Again, my second day of working on this was just incredibly tedious. It was literally sewing together squares just all day. The most interesting part was deciding what squares are going to end up in what tier of the skirt. I kind of decided to have all of the super small, really busy squares near the top of the skirt, and then have it descend into larger and larger squares. This row of super chaotic little guys is going to go at the top, and then for the middle, more intermediate squares, I decided to make a bunch of 9-square quilting squares, which did take a lot longer than I thought it would, but I really liked all of the patterns that I was able to come up with. I alternated some of my 9 squares with my biggest blank squares, and then I finally decided to do 2 rows of my medium squares at the bottom to do a super floofy big ruffle because I did seem to have the most of those. And slowly but surely, after literally an entire day, morning to rise of sewing, my skirt tiers started to all come together, and at the end I had something actually human-sized, and honestly maybe a little bit too human-sized. This is probably gonna end up being too long for me, but that is a problem for later, Kira.
So we have made pretty excellent progress on the autumn patchwork skirt at this point, but I do have an entire other patchwork skirt that I want to try to get to in this video. So today, I need to start sewing all of those patches together. However, I am hoping that this one will go just a little bit faster than the other one because I'm not planning on having it be entirely made out of patchwork. So y'all know this fabric that I've been trying to use up and have been complaining about for literally forever. The bane of my existence. They were originally drapes or curtains, and they ended up coming with a set of super long ties, which when you iron these out, you just get an extremely long tier of fabric that is perfect for the kind of tiered skirt that I want to make in this video. So for this one, I'm planning on having alternating tiers of patches and then this stuff, because I have, I think, at least 4 or 5 pieces of this. And I also have fewer patches in this color scheme. So together it should hopefully work, and I should end up with something that's like hopefully half the amount of patch sewing that I did yesterday. So let me see if I can get this done relatively quickly.
So spoilers, this basically did just take an additional whole day to sew together. Some of that is because I realized I probably didn't have enough squares, so I did cut up a few more extra scraps of fabric in the beginning, but I also did end up making a lot more 9 squares for this skirt, which just take longer to sew in general. It's a little bit more intricate. You gotta line things up and pay attention a lot more than you do whenever you're just brainlessly sewing together lines of rectangles. But I also did plenty of that too, just all around lots and lots of sewing today. But by the end of the sewing process, I was really happy with how all of the patterns and colors were coming out. I thought everything looked really good together, and admittedly at this stage it was looking a little bit flag, if you feel what I'm saying, but we will definitely move past that later in the video. And also I almost definitely made this skirt too long again. Blame it on my tall people energy. I must think I'm a giant too, apparently.
I am quite happy with the progress so far, but I do feel like it's missing just a couple of things. First of all, I still don't think some of the colors are quite vibing the way I want them to, especially some of like the yellows, browns, tans. Some of them are still a little bit too cool toned, and I really would prefer them warm toned. Also, I have a lot of this like super neon orange tone in here that is like, really a little bit too much. So I think before I get to actually putting everything together, I am gonna whip out the fabric dye again. Break just a couple more sewing rules. So after a little bit of deliberation about how I want to dye this, I kind of just decided I'm just gonna use my airbrush. I don't have a lot of like normal fabric dye on hand, so that means I don't have a lot of control for that method, and sure, I could just stick a bunch of this in a pot and hope for the best. I think that's gonna turn out very splotchy. Hopefully my airbrush is gonna give me just a little bit more control. Anyways, I have other things that I want to do to all of this, so let's do it. Okay, it's definitely rustic, but I do think the colors are a lot more unified than they were before, and I also tried to dull that like bright fluorescent orange as much as I could without like completely making it brown or something. So I'm very happy with how this came out. I think it looks pretty good. While I have the paint out and I'm kind of customizing my skirt a little bit more, I have been very inspired by some of like the patchwork pants and skirts that I've seen on Pinterest that have sort of this vibe to them. I love a little design. These are already so very maximalist, so I think it would be really cute to add some more fall motifs to it and some cute little designs by once again using some lino prints. I carved a couple of lino blocks in my previous video that I think would be really cute on this skirt, but I also think it would be really cute if I carved like some autumn leaves and some pumpkins. Maybe a spooky little cat or a ghost, I don't know. I really want this to be like the fall skirt that I own, so I'm thinking, you know, why not lean all the way into it? It's a beautiful day outside. I'm snacking on some kiwi, and it's time to do even more lino carving. So I have a couple more designs left that I still want to do for my autumn patchwork skirt and maybe like mix them into my celestial one too, but I also only have 2 more slabs of lino left. And I didn't want to buy anything new for this video, so I'm gonna try to just use these and see exactly what I can come up with. I think that I will be able to get the prints that I want out of these 2 little blocks. I also have a couple scraps in here. I have this little bag of larger scraps, so I might be able to use these as well, but prints that I want to do, once again, very spooky. I think I want to do a little bat. I also saw a really cute witch hat print that I kind of want to do, but that's it's getting maybe a little bit too much for the amount of material that I have. I already have some celestial prints that I can use on my other patchwork skirt, but I also might do a couple more prints to kind of like embellish that a little bit, mostly out of scraps, maybe like a couple of different interesting looking stars. But I think I can also use some of my spooky prints on that one because it like matches the theme. Like I have some of that tarot card fabric in there, which has like black cats, I think spooky bats in a couple of places. It's witchy. I think it works. And then I also have things like my mushroom and moth print already, which I think could potentially match either skirt. Kiwi break? I think right now I'm just gonna start sketching and see what I can come up with.
So as I was sketching here, I mostly just tried to keep everything pretty small to try to fit as many prints on each of the blocks that I had as possible. I figured that would be better anyway, since a lot of the squares that I wanted to print on were pretty small to begin with. And in the end, I was able to fit all of the prints that I mentioned beforehand on these blocks and then some. In addition to the ones I mentioned, I did an acorn, a couple of candles, I think an oak leaf. I was able to do a little spider and just some teeny tiny little leaves and mushrooms to frame around some other stuff. I think all of these turned out pretty freaking cute. And of course, carving them took absolutely forever because there were so many of them and they had lots of teeny tiny little details. But this gave me a lot of opportunity to practice my carving skills a little bit, try to make them cleaner, more well thought out than some of the things I've carved in the past. And along with that, I gotta say the process of carving these blocks is extremely meditative, very relaxing, but at the same time, it has like a hint of aggression to it because you're making art with like a sharp little knife. No! It's chaotic, it's slightly violent, but it's also beautiful, and that really is the type of craft that I tend to gravitate towards. Quite done yet. So first I think we're gonna do a little pumpkin, maybe something like this where it's got the little leaves coming off of it. I might attempt a couple of vines. The detail is also scary, so we'll see. The night before, I did carve my pumpkin. As promised, you gotta do a pumpkin on an autumn skirt. I wanted this to be a larger print since I'm gonna use it on some of the larger blocks of my skirt, so for this one, I basically used up an entire block of lino. And I also used this as an opportunity to once again practice a lot of detail and using my negative space better, trying to carve like basically line art lines into my lino. Just super delicate detailed stuff that I've been a little bit too afraid to attempt in the past. And I also think that this one turned out super cute. Definitely a little messy in a couple of places, but it looks historical, looks vintage. And here is my finished army of little prints. So now it's time to move on to the part of the video that I have literally been waiting all day to do. It's time to do some block printing. I am so excited for this. I have all my blocks that I carved earlier. I can't wait to test these babies out, but I am going to start on the celestial skirt first. So for this one, on a couple of my like 9 square patches, next to them I have these like huge purple spaces that I think will just be perfect for some of these celestial prints that I have from my last video. I can do like a lot of cool combinations with these. And for this, I am going to attempt to mix my own yellow ink. Should I have bought yellow ink for this that is specifically made for printing on clothing? Probably. But I have this white ink that is specifically made for screen printing on clothing. So I'm thinking if I mix a little bit of yellow-orange acrylic pigment into this, it's not gonna be that much pigment. I think that it will work well enough for my purposes here. So once again, I'm just gonna do this on a piece of parchment paper. I have a knife. Ooh, delicious. So I'm gonna take my painting knife, just glorb some of this onto my palette. I'm gonna try and mix a decent amount of this at once so that I don't have to do this every 5 seconds. Now I'm gonna grab, I think, some yellow ochre. Ah, I was wrong, cadmium yellow. Boop. And also some yellow ochre. Mix this up. Throw out a line like Bob Ross. And I'm gonna do just maybe one of these on the end here first.
I immediately don't know about this.
2 seconds later.
Okay, I washed my stamp and we're gonna try that again. That was definitely too much ink. Alright, I don't know how well this is gonna come out, but we're gonna give it a shot. Okay. Interesting. I definitely feel like I'm going to have to adapt with the lighter colored prints, but I still don't think that's bad. I still think it's cool. It's just like a little different from what I was expecting. Okay, I feel like that turned out really cute. I love the way the pattern fit together with all my different stamps. I don't hate that. It's a little different from what I wanted, but I still think it's really cute, so I'm gonna keep printing. Yeah, I got a lot of printing to do here.
Coming up with different designs for each square was extremely fun, and I definitely got carried away during the process of this. I was originally going to make these squares a little bit more minimal, maybe 1 to 2 prints per square, but it was just too much fun, and it looked really cool. So I did do cool designs on pretty much all the squares, and that made it take a lot longer than I thought it would. But to be fair, I did have really long strips of fabric for this skirt, so I was being naive. It was gonna take a long time either way. Once I was done printing on those middle tiers, I switched to the top tier and started experimenting with some smaller prints. Once again, it was super fun placing all the prints, trying to figure out what looks good where, and I was also heat sealing all of these as I went with my heat gun to make sure the ink set, make sure none of it was going to bleed or run or anything whenever these skirts get laundered later on. Like I said, all these prints took a really long time, but eventually I made it through all of them. And I was really on the fence about printing on the purple tiers that were just blank and didn't have any patchwork on them. I was originally thinking about leaving them blank, but my gut was telling me they needed something on them, and I actually asked my brother and he agreed. So I also decided to do alternating celestial print designs on those. On the bottommost tier, I did alternating larger and smaller prints, trying to spread them out in like 8-inch intervals, trying to make it as clean and even as I possibly could, you know, without putting in a ton of effort. Once again, I'm really happy I decided to print on this. I think it came out super cute. Once again, it's given Tangled vibes. I didn't even expect us to go there, but we're there, and I'm not mad about it. For the intermediate purple tier, I decided to show a little bit of restraint and do mostly small prints. I did alternating moons and stars on those, just really minimal and clean, but something to give some visual interest to that middle tier, and I definitely think that was the right call. I also really like how this tier came out.
Alright, we are now finished printing the first skirt, finally. That took longer than I expected, but I'm on to printing the second skirt now, and I am so excited for this. I have a lot of these larger block areas on this skirt too, so I think that's gonna be so perfect for these bigger prints that I have. I'm gonna start out with my lighter yellow color again so that I don't have to like wash anything right now. So let's go ahead and do a test print. I think here is gonna be our first victim. What should we do first? I think let's do a leaf first. This paint has been sitting out for a little while. Okay. Moment of truth. Ooh, okay. I definitely need to make sure my paint's a little less gooky, but look at that. Okay, let's do a little bat. That's also cute. Look at that little bat. He's kind of weird, but I like him. Oh. Okay, I think this first row of prints all turned out really cute and pretty clean. I am very happy with these. So I'm gonna try a couple other ones. This next section seems like a pretty good place to try out some of these little small ones that I have here.
I am once again super happy with how all of these printed. I think they turned out super cute. My yellow ink worked way better on all of these prints than I honestly thought it would. And I also am really pleased with my lino carving improvement throughout the last couple of videos that I've done. The first few that I did all the way last December definitely have novice energy all over them. They don't look very great when you print with them. They're cute, but they're just okay. These prints definitely turned out way better. I'm learning to carve stuff so much better, work with my negative space better, make everything cleaner, and I'm starting to learn a lot better about how to like make blocks so that they actually print well. This has been just pretty much an entire trial and error process because I've learned by basically just observing other people's work and seeing a couple of tutorials on Pinterest. So I'm definitely really proud of my progress with all of these. Also, shouts out to the wonderful lady Epi. Her work is what inspired me to try Lino cut in the first place. And if you want some cool stuff with Lino cut on it, she's got a shop and you should check it out. It's not sponsored or anything. I just wear her stuff all the time in my videos and I think it's really cute. So
okay, first round of printing is done with our yellow ink. Now I need to whip out the black ink and do all the like lighter color squares on these. I hope I have enough ink left, honestly. I don't have a ton of this. Just do a nice line, spread it out some, like Bob Ross painting mountains. Let's do a little spooky fella. Oh, very nice. I think these are maybe gonna even print better. Yeah, that's cute. Very vintage. Look at how cute this is turning out. Okay, let's keep going.
I think the yellow ink for the most part printed really great. I think they turned out adorable, but I think the black ink printed even better. Up until this video, I had only ever used black ink for this type of printing, and it usually doesn't fail me, and once again, I had pretty good luck with it in this video. It just goes on my stamps really easily. It comes out really opaque, but having a lot of texture, almost giving things like a really vintage finish to them. And again, whenever I started printing on these, I was going to do way fewer prints on these skirts. I was just gonna do a pop here and there for a little bit more detail, but I just really loved the contrast of all of the designs, both in the light ink and in the dark ink. I think it just turned out super graphic and cool, and it actually melded really well with all of the crazy patterns that I had going on. So I did a ton of these once again, and it took absolutely forever. But again, I think it was super worth it, and now I really want a quilt that looks like this because it's so cute. It's very me.
All right, we are done with all of the printing on the autumn skirt. I got all of my pieces here, but now I do want to switch back to the celestial one and print on all of the areas that could still use some black ink. Okay, so that took absolutely forever. It took about 4 hours longer than I thought it would. And that was just like my entire day yesterday. I was hoping to finish both of the skirts, and you know, I tried to girl boss a little too close to the sun there and it didn't work out. But today, I'm gonna try and finish both of the skirts. Possibly an equally ambitious goal because I have somewhere to be this evening. It's fine. We're gonna figure it out. Also, tell me why my bangs decided to do this today. I don't know what they're doing. So here's my skirt all laid out. I really love the pattern and the colors going on. It's so maximalist and whimsical. So right now my plan is to make that top folded tier the waistband area, and then it's gonna descend this way, of course. I also have a theory that what I have here might be a little bit too long, but I'm not entirely sure so far. So I think I'm gonna kind of just begin by sewing together these top few tiers and go from there and see if some of this is a little bit too long. I'll probably need at least one of these rows, but hopefully both. I really want to use all of this, but if not, I have another project in mind I can use some of these for. Nothing will go to waste. For the waistband, I'm just gonna be using some elastic again. I want it to be stretchy and cozy, so I'm gonna go ahead and gather these top two tiers together, and then I'm gonna work on installing the waistband.
I assembled these two skirts basically the exact same way. Once I had a large enough top tier assembled, I took some elastic and measured it the length of my waist, making sure it had a comfortable fit and a good amount of stretch. That elastic is going to be a lot shorter than the length of fabric that I have because I want it to gather. So to help me line everything up during sewing, I pinned the elastic to the middle point and ends of the skirt, and I sewed that elastic onto the skirt with a zigzag stitch, pulling on my elastic as I sewed to make sure that it stretches out as far as possible. And when you're done sewing and you let that elastic snap back into place, it creates a super stretchy, comfortable waistband. To finish up my waistband and make it clean, I folded it over a couple of times to hide the unfinished edge, and I sewed that down with the exact same method I did before, which creates a super easy elastic skirt waistband. Like I said, I use this exact same method on both skirts. It's the same thing, so I'm not showing it 2 times. Next, I pinned together the intermediate tiers and sewed those down with both a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch to prevent the edges from fraying. I sewed that second tier to the top tier, which looked like this. I then hemmed the bottommost tier of the skirt to make sure that edge is nice and clean. And as I was pinning that last tier together, I tried it on, and this is when I confirmed, yes, the skirt would be way too long if I left it the way it is. I ended up just cutting that bottommost tier off of the autumn skirt, which sucks, but hey, that's what you get for guesstimating.
Is it now a different day, meaning I did not, in fact, get this done before my function last night? You know the answer to that question.
Like I said, I followed that exact same process on that second skirt and ran into the exact same problem with the skirt length.
So I checked the length on this skirt once again, and with this piece, it's just a little bit longer than I would like it to be, so I'm once again gonna leave this out, use it for something else, and just use the pieces that I have here for this skirt. So for the tiers on this skirt, I'm once again gonna do it the same way I did on the other one, the wrong way. Instead of using gathering stitches, I'm just gonna pin it. I found that to be a little bit easier, and I cannot be bothered with gathering stitches on pieces of fabric this long. I don't feel like it.
So on both skirts, I gathered the tiers by just matching up the midpoints and then matching the midpoints of the midpoints and so on. And with enough pinning, it gives you okay gathers. It's not the cleanest, but my initial gathering stitches were not doing very well with the different kinds of fabric grain and stuff I had in my patchwork. So this was gonna have to do the trick with these. And finally, the only real difference in finishing up the side seam of these skirts is that on the autumn patchwork skirt, I did sew up a little slit on the very bottom just to give it a little bit more swooshiness and fullness, but otherwise I decided to French seam both of them, which you of course do by sewing your fabric wrong sides together. Then you trim off the excess seam allowance as close to that stitch as you possibly can, flip your piece right side in, and then sew the piece right sides together, which encases that seam and makes sure that it's nice and clean from both sides. So with both skirts now complete and looking pretty great if you ask me, it's time for a reveal. Right?
So I was filming the reveal, and honestly, it's too hot and bright outside for that nonsense right now, even though it's literally the evening time. Oh, my sweat has sweat. This is ridiculous. So I have set an alarm on my phone for an hour from now. And in the meantime, I'm gonna see what I can do with the remaining scraps from this project. As you saw, I had to leave a row off of both of my skirts because I guesstimated just a little bit too long. Again, I was not really mathing earlier this week, but that's not a bad thing because now I have like lots of printed kind of finished up scraps to play with, and this piece in particular, I'm kind of holding it up, trying it on in like various different ways. Since the bottom of it is already finished, I sort of tried it on like this, and I went, ooh, that would actually make like a really cute mini dress. I don't think I have enough of just this to make a mini dress, but now that I have this, I might be able to make something happen. Did I also mention that I may or may not be literally fighting against Mother Nature because it also might rain in an hour? There's like a 5% chance. So there's also that to worry about. I have an hour, I have some fabric, I have a longish zipper and a dream, and I'm gonna try to make something real quick. Even though I told myself, hey, maybe don't do that when you literally have an hour left to work on this video, maybe do it next week. I'm doing it anyways. So the plan once again is trace using clothing I already have, so I'm gonna kind of use these 2 pieces as a guide for my little pattern.
But first I had to kind of reassemble this fabric into usable chunks big enough for my pattern pieces. So I first cut and re-sewed large enough pieces to use for my skirt pattern, gave those a quick iron to make them nice and clean, and I was also a little smarter on this piece and I decided to add a lining to it, both for comfort and for structure. So I cut out both of my skirt pieces and then used those as a guide to cut out my lining pieces, and then I had to do a little seam ripping to give myself some more fabric real estate.
I've deliberated a little bit over how to do the bodice on this, and I kind of just decided to use this old corset pattern. It's from corsetpatternmaker.com, so it's like pattern that's made to my custom measurements, so it fits well and everything. I'm just gonna cut the front on the fold and then make it lace up the back with a zipper attached to the other skirt, and hopefully this will work pretty well. I will probably also put a little bit of boning on this because we can't really work with grain lines whenever we're piecing fabric like this, so hopefully this gives me the kind of cut that I want.
So I found the section of fabric that I wanted on the front, cut that front bodice piece on the fold, did the same with the back bodice piece, making sure to leave enough seam allowance for a zipper. Those two pieces also got a lining cut, and then we were on to adding some boning. I pinned and sewed 2 lines of bias tape as a boning channel on the front and back, and also sewed a couple of boning channels just out of the lining and main fabric alongside those. This was mostly just to conserve materials because I didn't have very much of this bias tape lying around. I also installed a couple of darts in the back skirt piece to give it a little bit of a better fit in my lower back, and then I was on to pinning the front and back panels together, sewing those up, and installing my zipper, which again is not something that I'm very good at. This zipper was also probably a little bit too short for this dress. I wish I had a longer one on hand, but I didn't, so I just used this. And I used a slightly different zipper installation method on this one than what I usually do, and I think it helped make my zipper installation better. I'm not very good at these, but I'm trying to work on it. Finally, it was time to pin my front and back panels right sides together and sew them up so that this actually fits me nice. This took a couple of fitting tries to get right because I was trying to really nip in the waist and make this dress have like a certain amount of shape and structure to it. I kind of took it in incrementally so that I could give it just the right fit, and I am glad that I exercised caution for once because I think the fit on this dress turned out looking super cute. Finally, I finished up the messy inside edges with a zigzag stitch because nobody's gonna see that. And before we fully finish up the dress, I needed to install some boning. Someone out there is gonna think their phone just went off. I'm leaving it in. Anyways, I used actual boning for this because I had some on hand for once, so that's nice because this should actually kind of heat form to my body eventually, give the dress a little bit more nice shape. And once I had all of those cut and installed, I just finished up that ugly topside edge with some navy bias tape that I had just lying around. And I also sewed on some cute little olive green ribbons for some decorative straps. I also forgot to mention, this definitely did not take an hour. I probably shouldn't have done this actually, but I think it came out really cute. And with this impulsive unplanned dress out of the way, now it's finally time for the reveal. Anyways, hey, welcome to the end of the video. I don't really want to share with you how late it is right now. You know, you saw it. I got some last minute ideas. Let's talk about the things that I made in this video. Overall, I'm really happy with how everything came out. The overall verdict is, this is my new obsession. I really enjoyed just diving into patchwork and the concept of quilt making, just kind of like dipping my toes in there, seeing how the water is. It turns out the water is addictive, and I now have a Pinterest board, but I had so much fun doing this. So let me get a little bit more specific here. God, there is no organization going on in my brain right now, but this skirt number 1, the autumnal one, I love it so much. Put it in my veins, dude. Colors, the overall like aesthetic of it, I think it turned out so good. It turned out like basically exactly how I wanted it to, especially in terms of aesthetic. The only thing that I don't love about it, there's probably about 2. First of all, I do wish I had made it just a little bit more voluminous. I was going for more of like the silhouette with it because that is what I tend to gravitate towards, but I probably could have made it just a little bit more voluminous. But I do have
you know, one more qualm with it. I was not the cleanest with like the inside of this. You know, you probably noticed over the course of this video. When some people do this, they French seam their squares, they have a lining, they have something to prevent the itchiness that is occurring inside of this. But my thing is, this is gonna be a fall autumnal skirt. It's a skirt to look nice. I own other skirts. I can just put a different skirt under this as like a slip and then problem solved. So I don't really see it as a big deal personally. If I wear it in the summertime, you know, I didn't have anything under it today whenever I shot the reveal. It wasn't too bad. Like, it didn't bother me too much. It's just every time a thread touched my leg, I did think there was a bug on me, and I just don't stand for that. Honestly, with this one, I don't really have any qualms or complaints. I think the volume of this one came out better. Like, it's definitely a lot more swooshy and everything. I think the only thing is I did still make it maybe a little too long, even with my tall boots. So I could hem it again. There's a couple other things I could do to fix that problem. If it really becomes an issue, we do that. Both these skirts, very Kira approved. Check out the comfort of that waistband. This dress, thoughts and feelings. For the amount of time that I spent on it, it was an evening, you know? And for the limited materials, like, I made this out of scraps, garbage. I think it turned out so cute. Like, this is a garbage dress made from garbage, and it's so adorable. This dress, like you probably saw, I did put a lining in it. I was smart with this one, so it's not itchy, it's very comfortable, and it fits really nicely. The boning is great. The fit is great. The zipper looks kind of good for once. I'm not good at zipper. The only thing that's a little difficult about this dress, the zipper was not as long as it probably should have been to get over my butt. So hard to get this dress over my butt and onto my body. Once I do, it fits really, really nicely, but it's just like, it's a little bit of a process to like shimmy it into place. Anyways, that was a lot of yapping. I hope you guys enjoyed this once again. I'm really on a journey and a mission right now with my fabrics. Which brings me to my final point of this video. Did you think we were done? How naive of you. We're not done yet, and we still have one more installment in this saga. That's gonna come out next weekend. We did the biggest pieces. Now we did the like really intermediate / small pieces, which begs the question, how do we use up the scrappiest of the scraps? Find out. Hey buddy, he wanted to be part of the video. Find out next week on the fabric that I've accumulated is stressing me out and I really need to do something about it. This is such a long outro. Does that say 11 minutes? That's upsetting. Anyways, that was a lot, but thank you so much for watching, especially if you watched till the end of the video. If you want to watch more stuff like this, I have many a sewing video on my channel. I also do a lot of other nonsense, so I will have, I guess, part 1 of this linked in the description. If you haven't seen that and you want to go see it, you should. It's like an hour long. Do you need content today? But if you did enjoy this, maybe consider pressing the subscribe button for the hijinks that are going to ensue next week. Like the video if you liked it. Tell the video it's pretty in the comments. Oh, my head hurts right now. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, especially if you watched to the end of the video. But as always, the biggest thank you for this video and every single one of my videos goes to my patrons. And especially my executive producers.
Cinderus, Speak of the Devil, Tiro2, Donna Shipley, Mystic, Danielle Bergner, Scribble, Jazz the Bat, Mushroom Sita, Ghastly, Galaxy Stardust 035, Luxabar, My Name is A, Becca, Nilo Nam, Cyrus Orion, Jenny Craftsma, I Do TKD, Ren, Band Off the Yellow, Cloud Max, Villy Smelly, Stabby Horse, Heebie Jeebies, Cardia X, Christina Cantia Art, Fiasco, Mossy Raven, Silver, To Prism, I'm not saying that name on the internet, ABW Makes, Ice Kavan, A Wendu, Liana, Ermler Jean, Phoenix, PNG Not Found, Freedom and Gus Gus, Dodo, Zyle S, Agent Sketchy, Thea Maia, Lovisa, Eloquent Silence, Sushi McNushi, Hypnos, Katie, Sweet Winter Garden, Gravity Drop, I Hang Out with Cats at Parties, and Bean the Bread.
What does my brother call it again? Acute delirium. That's what he says when he gets home from work and he's like this. He calls it acute delirium. So there you go. That's a brotherism for you. More next week. Bye.